Rock and roll. Here we go. Rebel time.
Rebel time. We might need some sort of lead-in music for that someday, Pete. Rebel time. I don't know.
By the way,
Hammer time was pretty good, though.
John, last night I watched, I highly recommend it to everybody, the documentary on Deion Sanders of his first couple of years down there. It's really, really amazing, and it leads you right up to him going to Colorado. So it's pretty good. It's worth a watch for anybody who hasn't watched it yet.
Yeah, phenomenal player and charismatic guy, leader, all that stuff. And Pete, his son isn't half bad either.
Let me tell you, the guy's got more kids than you can count, and he's a wonderful father. I mean, his Father's Day had to be the greatest ever. But his son, the quarterback, is really something special. You always wonder, he's playing for dad. Is he really that good? All those kind of questions. Those questions got answered by me watching some of the film and everything that kid did in the last year or two. I mean, he's unbelievable. He is up to all the billing that he got. So is that other kid who was the 1 5-star that they were able to get to go to Jackson State, who also went to Colorado. He's a stud too, man. That kid's sharp. Woo.
Oh, they got a bunch there. They're loaded at Colorado now, Pete. Now, I don't think it's quite the same as Bama and Georgia and Ohio State and Michigan, but I think they got a pretty good slate of kids versus what they'd had previously.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
And the games are sold out. I mean, it's almost impossible to get a ticket. Scalpers are even having a hard time. But you guys probably tuned in for the Rebel's Edge. And so thank you for joining us the day after Juneteenth. That makes this the 20th, I guess, Pete.
Yeah.
So let's get started with the Macro Minute. And my Macro Minute is going to be Americans' online shopping habits should have most retailers worried. This was the cover story from Barron's this weekend. And it's about this company that most people have never heard of, but they've probably seen ads on Instagram, Pete, and perhaps Twitter for exactly what these guys do. Shirts, shorts, all kinds of things at unbelievable prices. Turns out Americans really like those cheap prices, and they're buying the heck out of this stuff.
Well, mine's going to be pretty quick, John, but I do want to hit on this is macro to the next level. So China, they lowered their rates. The ECB, they increased the rates, and we paused. So if there's anything more confusing for people right now on what's going on in the world, I mean, the world banks are all going in all sorts of different directions. People have no clue where they're going, just like you're looking at the markets. One day we're up 400 points. Next day we're down 300 points. That is the markets we're in. That's the Macro Minute.
All right. Well, then let's dive into the fantastic future.
Fantastic futures.
Well done, Jared.
Cocoa. So for all of you who like chocolate out there, take a look at cocoa, because that chart tells you an awful lot. This is the highest level since 2016, Pete. So basically, if you were a buyer down there in that 2017 area or whatever, look at how much it's up since then. And by the way, to date, it's up 24%. So this is one of those commodities that, wow, is just off to the races. 3,236 per metric ton. Bang.
Yeah, that is a bang. Well, I'll tell you what, John, I got a little bit of a Burl Ives coming right back at you. Gold, not too terribly long ago, it was trading $2,055, right? Well, it's about $110 less than that now. And then you look at the nice run up that we had in silver. Silver was just trading up there towards that 24.50 mark, John. That's pulled back significantly as well, closer to 23. So a lot going on there as well. A lot of movement we're seeing there, but it just can't sustain these rallies. And that's the one problem that we're seeing there. But I'll tell you what, you want something liquid in the commodity space, that's where you want to go.
Bang, I agree. Well, what about some of these moves today, Pete, in the market? Now, of course, we didn't trade. It was a national holiday yesterday, bank holidays as well. So nobody really, except for crypto traders, did any trading yesterday. But Dice, this is a biopharmaceutical company, Dice rather, Therapeutics, that leverages their proprietary technology. And they are apparently going to be bought by Lilly. Again, we've said time and time again, once you get to the stage where you've got a viable product out there and you've passed enough of those phase 1, phase 2, you might not even have to pass phase 3 before a big pharma jumps in and takes you. And apparently that's the case here with Lilly, Pete.
Yeah, and this is not a huge bite that they're taking, John, when you're talking about all of the different numbers out there. I know it's $2.4 billion on this buyout, which is a big number for sure. Stock ran almost all the way up to the number, which is a little bit unusual because oftentimes, it takes a little bit of time for this whole thing to play out. Both were on board. Both were very excited about what's going on. I think Lilly has been really doing a masterful job of how they've orchestrated everything that they're doing, John. One of the most important things is when you have certain drugs where they're starting to run out of that time frame that they've got, where they're exclusive. I think that's something that Lilly's done a great job of stacking up and stacking up and stacking up. They've got, you just mentioned the different phases that there are. In phase 3 right now, they've got over 21 various different areas in the world that they have in terms of some of the drugs. And then you go a little deeper than that, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. They are doing everything right. It's why the stock is near the highs. It's also why you take a bite of $2.4 billion to buy somebody like Dice, stock's up 1%, John. Normally you see these stocks kind of dip a little bit. It's not happening today. Lilly is rocking.
Yeah, and the other part that Pete mentioned there, folks, both boards have approved this. So the only reason that it would run up to a price close to $48 a share, which is the buyout, would be people speculating that somebody else might come in and follow the deal up, as in buy them, put in a higher bid. Because otherwise, this one should probably trade at about a $3 to $4 discount from that 48 target, just because it'll take probably 4 to 6 months to get close to closure on this. Yeah. All right, let's talk about RIVN, Pete. Last week it was General Motors. The week before it was Ford. Now it's RIVN saying they've agreed to adopt the North American charging standard, which has been set down by Tesla. So this is another feather in Elon Musk's cap, because yet another EV maker has signed on and said, look, we're going to have our own superchargers, but you guys already have more. We're going to join your network and make our charging part of your network as well.
Well, you and I were talking about this, and we were talking just last week about Tesla. We were actually focused at that time, I believe, on Tesla and obviously what's going on with these supercharging battery stations that they've got. Everybody seems to be part of that, John. All the different EV names, they're all just lining up saying, hey, we'd like to be a part of this whole thing. Ford, GM, as you mentioned. Now you get Rivian. It's really pretty interesting to watch this whole thing. And by the way, as we watch this, I will say this. They being Tesla, continue to be the most actively traded stock there is in the options world. On Friday, they traded 3.6 million contracts in there, John. They've traded over 5 million contracts in single days. So we had 53 million total options trading on Friday, which is very unusual going into like a holiday weekend or anything like that. That's how hungry people are in the markets, how much they're participating in the markets. And Tesla, the added revenue that they are getting is just amazing. Feels a little like Meta, John, where you just find a spot, then you go somewhere else, then you go somewhere else. Meta, Apple, that's what good companies, well-run companies do. And I would say that Elon right now is about as well-run as it gets.
$270 plus today, folks. You look back a month ago, you could have bought it for $100 cheaper. And I'm wondering whether or not Gates or any of those guys that were shorting it covered, Pete, because if they didn't, boy, are they in a world of hurt.
I love all that, right. Please. Gates can suck it.
Well, anybody short can suck it in Tesla. They're not doing well with that. All right, let's talk about Avis, Pete. Avis Budget is what they changed the name to. And that's not because the name changed that the stock's up, but it was up today. Morgan Stanley, near and dear to our hearts, has raised CAR, that's the symbol, to overweight. What do you think, Pete? This is a pretty interesting trade and a pretty interesting performance out of the stock.
Yeah, getting a little bit of a boost off of this, John. It's not that far away even from 52-week highs. And it wasn't that terribly long ago where they were in a big struggle, right? I mean, we looked at a lot of the rent-a-cars. Obviously, the pandemic was the huge contributor to a lot of that selling and all the risk that was on. But boy, have they come back. And I think there's a lot of different factors that play into this. And I'm sure that's part of the Morgan Stanley report. I didn't get to see it other than the fact that they did upgrade it, John. And it's interesting because they have pricing power. You know, it's amazing when you go to these airports, and I know you travel far more than I do. If you're not in an Uber or some sort of black car or whatever it is, and you are at the rental stations, they are packed. And I'll tell you, there aren't enough cars oftentimes when you're looking out there. So they are in a great position. I think when you've got pricing power, you kind of have the commanding moves going forward, at least for now. And I can understand why they've decided, despite the fact that stock's already made a nice move, they think there's a move even higher than this.
Pete, how about this? It's got a PE of 4. Yeah. So single digit PE, a beta of almost 2.5, meaning that this moves about 2.5 times whatever the S&P 500 is moving. That's pretty, both of those are pretty impressive. Obviously, the one with how much movement, that can be volatile to the downside, not just outperforming to the upside, but clearly here today, Pete, on a turnover of about 465,000, which is normal full session volume, it's done that in the first half of the day on the Morgan Stanley recommendations. So,
and there is a little bit of, there's also a little bit, just one last thing, John, on the short interest side, there is some short interest here as well. When you look at what they've got 5% of the outstanding, they've got 15% of the float short. So there are some shorts out there in this one, which is maybe giving them a little added squeeze as well.
I agree. All right. What about CureVac? This is one that we've talked about several times, Pete. Up double digits today. 2 million shares in the first hour and a half versus 500,000 share normal. So we know it's not a normal day. They had a study designed to evaluate the safety and so forth with patients that had a certain type of cancer that had already had surgical resection. Pete knows that means that somebody had that cut out of their body, that cancerous area, and probably they resected around it as well. Pete took the healthy skin even around it out. And then they gave them radiotherapy. So this is being applied to those people, Pete. And obviously anybody who's making progress in cancer, we always pay attention to those because that affects so many millions, hundreds of millions of people worldwide.
Yep. The world of oncology is just unbelievable. And this is an interesting name, John. They do have a cash burn. That is a bit of a concern, I think, that some would have for them for sure right now. But it's not so big that, you know, they don't have time. Plus, they have some good partnerships up also with Glaxo. So that's something I think that's a feather in their hat. They have a really, really deep pipeline. The only issue with that pipeline, though, John, it's almost all phase 1, which, you know, is a long ways from phase 2, phase 3, and then getting it onto the market. So that would be a little bit of a concern, but I like the fact that they've got a big dog for a partnership. That's going to help them, I think, as they get closer and further down the road. And who knows? We've talked about what's going on in healthcare. They're all buying somebody, John, to kind of expand the pipelines and what the revenues are for a lot of these healthcare names. And it's been working, and they're spending billions and billions of dollars to do this across the board in big pharma. This is one of those names that maybe, just maybe down the line would be one of those in that category if they can prove out what they're doing is working and can get approval and it gets closer. I think that could be a really big storyline in the future.
Well, no doubt about that. And the stock is certainly trading as if people don't want to be short this one either, Pete. They want to bet on the upside. And those that have been on the short side have probably been tagged almost as bad as the Tesla shorts. All right, let's dive into a little sports, Pete. There's a lot being said about this guy that you're about to cover right now.
Well, John Morant knows that he did the wrong thing. He knows that he did it more than once, John, in the flashing of the gun and everything else. And when it comes to professional sports, they want as much as they can to be squeaky clean and get themselves into a position where people aren't throwing, the rocks at them. Well, they're not doing a great job with it. And John, I don't know what you think. 25 games is what they've decided to suspend him. And now this is going to have some huge effects on him in terms of not only career, but when you look at his contracts and where he is. The guy is one of the best basketball players in the NBA. So from the being on the court aspect, he is everything that they'd ever want. It's all this stuff that happens off the court that everybody's concerned about for the right reasons. And we talk about it in the NFL all the time. You don't want to tarnish, what you're seeing here in this great shield of the NFL. The problem in the NBA is Adam Silver. This guy's not very tough. He allows the load management, doesn't seem to care at all about that. He doesn't seem to care at all, John, that there were teams that absolutely decided, you know what, we're going for the first pick in the draft. We're just going to freaking tank this thing the rest of the way. That's a pretty awful thing. I don't know why that wouldn't have some sort of penalties to that. So he's been soft on everything across the board. I don't know. You tell me. Maybe I'm just being too aggressive about this, but 25 games, really? Is that so? In other words, that's what you're going to do. In the NFL, I will remind you with Goodell, he will smack these guys down. He will take them out for half the season, a full season, 2 seasons. He has been very, very aggressive about how he has gone after this to protect the shield. I don't think Adam Silver is doing a very good job with that, but am I being too harsh on him, John?
Well, Tamaritris, Pete, I guess that's his name, Tamaritris Jamal Morant, and they call him Ja. He's a young guy. He's 23 years old. He was a consensus All-American as a sophomore at Murray State. Most people wouldn't think too many big-time players come out of Murray State. So he's awfully lucky to both be such a young guy with that much talent and to be a starting point guard that, as Pete says, is one of the best in the league. And I don't disagree. But I will totally agree with Pete on the Adam Silver being a putz because, he is not helping the image of the league that he is supposed to be promoting, if not defending. And you would think that a sit down with this young guy, Pete, after that first, because luckily he hasn't been shooting the gun in clubs and things like that. But apparently he likes bringing the gun to places where there are other people. I'll say clubs. That's what they appear to be. And then letting his friends take pictures of him on social media with the gun. That can't end well. No. For a whole bunch of reasons. Somebody could grab it. It could accidentally go off. We know that's happened in the NFL, and we know what happened after that. I think this is one of those issues, Pete, where this is really a problem for Memphis because a 25-game suspension on roughly, a 90-game season, Pete, is a very substantial part of the season. Like you said, it could have been worse if it was NFL. But think of the ownership of this club, the Memphis Grizzlies, as well as his fellow players. I mean, again, he's one of the best players around. How do you replace him for 25 games?
Right.
So if you can't have a sit down with this guy and tell him, hey, look, after that first time, if we see you on social or if you drop a gun when you're going into a liquor store or anything else, you're going to get a whole year suspension. And at your salary, that's going to be tens of millions of dollars. Do you really want to risk that just to carry a gun around? If you need protection, hire somebody. But don't carry a gun around because it reflects badly on us and it'll cost you in one way or another.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sticking with, I think you do half the season minimum. I maybe could even be worse. And I understand he didn't kill anybody. I get it. I mean, he didn't fire it. He's just got the gun. He's showing everybody the gun. And then he had the fake gun. So, fake gun, real gun really doesn't matter. I mean, when it's all said and done, it's the image is the problem. And that's where I think there's a real problem, where there's that disconnect with Adam Silver, where he just won't come down on these guys for any of the stuff they do. Oh, except for during COVID. But anyway, the hell with that. We're not going to go into that whole discussion. All right. So, so the Phoenix Suns, John, they got a new owner, or at least recently bought the team, right? And the guy is just stirring it up like I have never seen a guy come in and do before. Now, I personally don't agree with much of anything, by the way. I find it so interesting that that's the direction, but it is something that I think that needs to be focused on, because he fires Monty Williams. Now, Monty Williams, John, brought these guys to the finals not too many years ago. They were in it again this year. They were not in the finals, but in the playoffs. A pretty damn good basketball team. And they lost to who? The team that won it in 5 games. So the Nuggets. So, you kind of look at that and go, well, that's kind of interesting. I got to pay him a whole bunch of money. Oh, by the way, he signed a contract with Detroit for $78.5 million, John, the biggest ever in the NBA. So somebody out there thinks a lot about Monty Williams, and he is an amazing person if you ever get to know anything about this guy. But now you've got this huge trade involving the same team, Phoenix. They're taking CP3, and they said, you know what? It's been a great run. You're maybe getting a little bit old. We're going to kick you to the curb. We're going to go young. We're going to go with Bradley Beal. That's fine. And then, by the way, we're going to give you a boatload of draft picks as well. Okay. So, Washington has got that. Now, Washington is predicted not to keep CP3, John. They most likely will let him, figure out what they're going to do with him, but most likely he's going back to his home, LA, either the Clippers or the Lakers. So I don't think anybody's going to have a sorrow party for this guy when it's all said and done either. I think he's going to do fine back in his home. But what in the world is going on here, John? Is the guy just wanting to reshape everything so nothing that exists that was there before, he's getting rid of it? So he's got rid of the coach, he got rid of the top player, and he's going in that direction. But why, and what do you think he's doing, and do you think it's going to work?
Well, it's a work in progress, Pete. And obviously, one of the guys they got, this Isaiah Todd, was the 31st pick in the draft in 2021, but he's not been playing in the league. He's been playing in their G League affiliate the past couple of years. So, yeah, you got another guy thrown into this deal, but is it enough to deal off one of your star players? Like you've already talked about the coach. Now you dealt off this star player over to the Wizards and so forth. Last week, you and I were talking about Jordan and what a tremendous purchase he made for 180 mil for the Charlotte Hornets. And he was not the guy. He also had struggled to make them a winner. This guy has just stepped in, and he's tearing the thing apart, like you say, because he wants to put his mark on it. Now, you and I have seen that happen before, Pete, with the Dallas Cowboys, when unfortunately Jerry Jones decided, you know what, I'm cleaning house. I'm getting rid of Jimmy Johnson and a bunch of these guys and bringing in some people that I know that are recognized but have never coached in pro before. And granted, Jimmy hadn't coached in pro before either, Pete, when Jimmy came out of Miami. Mm-hmm. But Jimmy did nothing but win, baby, to steal that from the Raiders, just win, baby. But all of a sudden, the Cowboys kind of became nothing after one more Super Bowl. They became nothing. They just kind of fell apart, and Troy talks about it a lot as far as there was no more discipline after Jimmy left. Mm-hmm. Even though we both might appreciate Barry Switzer, he didn't have the same degree of discipline that Jimmy put upon that team, and thus they didn't have the same degree of winning. So I don't know, Pete. I would have thought that he would have been better off letting things play for a year and then deciding, okay, here's what I'm going to do. But, it's his money. I guess he's going to spend it.
Yeah, Ishbia is an interesting cat. The moves that he's made, I think, have been extraordinary. I'm going to throw out one last stat for you, John. So the regular season of the NBA, 1.59 million viewers is what they are averaging, right? 1.59 sounds like a pretty decent number, actually, when you think about it. And it's not so bad, except for the fact when you look over at the NFL and you compare them directly and you say, well, they slipped 3% in 2022 to 16.7 million viewers. So you talk about 10x. Well, this is more than 10x. So it gives you a little bit of a perspective of this. And I'm talking regular season. I realized in the playoffs, they jumped all the way up to 5.5, almost 6 million, which is still about a third of an NFL standard game, just a regular run of the mill game. And the only reason they were down 3% this past year, John, is a lot of people didn't like the Thursday night scheduling where they were on NFL Network or you had Amazon or whatever. But I think that's also good vision from the NFL, which is people are getting away from the standard old TV and they are going to different various places to try to consume this. So I think they're trying to stay up with that, with the Amazons of the world, and maybe even throw in the NFL Network, even though that's through the cable process. So very, very interesting, but it is amazing just to look at the numbers that are going on right now and just how dominant. Now, they had some good playoffs until they got to the finals, John. It was the lowest viewed finals on record in the NBA. So it did not do well. And Denver, apparently, and the combination of Denver and Miami just did not do well. They did very well with all the playoffs going up to that, but for the finals, it was the lowest on record. So unfortunately, I think sometimes it comes down to what the teams are, where they're from, and how big is that environment. Is Denver huge? It's not, but it's big. Miami huge? Probably not, but it's pretty good size. But it's not Boston. It's not LA. It's not those big markets that people like to see.
Yeah. Well, it's there is no doubt, Pete, as you and I like to say, because we both played the game. But pro football and college football will both crush any other domestic sport that's played. Hockey, baseball, basketball, lacrosse, any of those. Yeah. Put them all together, they don't equal one football game.
No, it's
but
amazing.
Nonetheless, I'm not saying everybody should just watch football, but I am pointing out that that's where the money is and that's where the advertisers go, because they go where the eyeballs are.
Right.
All right, folks. Thanks for joining us today. We are taking the day off tomorrow, I think, Pete, for the Rebels Edge. First time in over a year that on a regular day we're taking the day off, but we have to because Pete's going to be filming live in Chicago. And for that reason, we're going to have to say, we'll see you on Thursday.